Hello, friends from Five Reasons. Welcome back to another edition of our Marlins Report. Today, as usual, with our friend David Fernandez. David, how are you? Welcome back.
Alejandro, I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Good, good, good. Enjoying finally watching some baseball.
Yes,
Nothing
sir.
like watching some afternoon baseball while you work and do some other stuff at the same time, or even listen to some games. If you're one of those that are blocked here because you are in South Florida, you can still listen to the games and at least know what's going on with the Marlins. So for today's episode, David, you wrote up a piece, an article on FiveReasonSports.com talking about the bullpen, and I also want to talk about the center field situation. So those are our two topics for this episode today, because these are two of the things that the Marlins just seemed to maybe forgotten a little bit when they decided to spend some money here and there, or make some trades. And the roster for the opening day, which is about a week away from us today, is not as complete as we would like to, right? So let's go ahead and dive right into it. Let's start with the pitchers. Pitching is always important. Pitching is always the key. And I know we've complained so much about lack of hitting here in Miami and the Marlins, but at the same time, we do have a great starting rotation. We need a bullpen to back that up. What's going on with the Marlins? Who's going to be closing? Who's going to be in the bullpen? I only read about Blyer, not much going on in the bullpen. How's that situation going right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think you phrased it pretty well when you said not quite complete as far as the roster is concerned, because the reality is there are some glaring holes with this roster. The bullpen, which we're going to talk about, specifically the back end of the bullpen,
Yeah.
and then the gaping hole that we have in center field, right? As far as the bullpen is concerned, Kim Eng, she said, ahead of spring training, she said in the off season that getting a bat was the team's primary focus, right?
Yeah.
And we know that the Marlins were in on a few different players. We know that they were in talks with some teams to maybe execute a trade, but ultimately the players that they landed were Avisail Garcia, right,
Hmm.
before the lockout, and then after the lockout, Jorge Soler.
Yeah.
When you factor in those two guys, plus some of the other things that they did in the offseason, right? So extending Sandy, extending Richard Blyer, Miguel Rojas, you add, the trade for Jacob Stallings and Joey Wendell, all of that adds up to $168 million that they've, you know, allocated this offseason.
Yeah.
So they've spent money, but they didn't necessarily spend it in center field, although they brought in two outfielders. And then
Hmm.
they haven't really spent much of anything at all in the bullpen. They didn't go the free agent route for a closer. There were some names that were out there, but while they were looking for a bat, while they were trying to upgrade the lineup, that's when all the closers went off the board in free agency. We saw Kenley Jansen, who would
Hmm.
have been perfect here. He went to Atlanta, which
I
is
think he just didn't like Miami. A couple of years ago was the same. He preferred the Dodgers. I mean, he likes contending teams. I get
yeah. No,
it.
I listen. I get it too, and it's hit or miss with bullpen guys, right? And it's hit or
Yeah.
miss with closers. So but fans are upset, right? Some of us are upset because they didn't bring in the big name. So who are they left with, right? Well, obviously, you look at who was the closer at the end of the season last year, which was Dylan Floro. But the problem is, Dylan Floro is dealing with some soreness, right? He's been slow to get going here this spring. I don't think he's made an appearance yet in the Grapefruit League, right? So, when you look at he's got the stats up through 10 games. I mean, the Marlins are 6-4 through 10 games, and the bullpen actually hasn't been all that bad. You see Anthony Bender at the top of that list there. He's pitched the most in terms of appearances.
Yeah.
So he's made 5 appearances, and they've kind of mixed and matched back there, which is something that Mattingly admitted he might have to do with the closer, which isn't something that he's traditionally done in the past. Mattingly likes to have everybody have their set roles, right? And we saw that to a certain extent last year when They brought in Anthony Bass, who was a disaster at the beginning, but he actually pitched okay, I guess, for in the long run for the
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
the season. But then once he was replaced, Yimi Garcia took over as closer. And then once Yimi was dealt to Houston, Floro took over, right? And Floro finished with 15 saves. I think he blew 6 saves, which obviously isn't great, but he has that experience, and he's really the only one with extensive experience. Beyond that, we're looking at
Probably Bender, right?
yeah,
That would
Anthony
be the
Bender.
arm.
Yeah, he had 3 saves last season. He blew 2 saves, I think.
Mhm.
And if you look at sort of his splits in terms of and splits might be the wrong term to use here, but when you look at his stats in save situations, he
Mhm.
actually pitched better last year in save situations than Floro did. Bender put up a 1.10 ERA with a 0.98 WHIP in save situations, and his batting average against was just 203 in save situations. Floro, on the other hand, he had a 5.53 ERA in save situations with a 1.66 WHIP. And in high leverage situations, opposing batters were hitting 2.52 against him. He has a good career ERA. He's got a 3.18 career ERA. So we know that he can pitch, and he's got experience. He's, been to the World Series, things like that. But if he's not healthy here to start, and he might not be, he might land on the injured list, to get things going. Then we're looking at sort of this rotating cast of characters with Bender and Bass and maybe Blyer if, the opposing lineup has a bunch of lefties coming
Yeah.
up in that
What
spot.
what are the Marlins gonna do with all these starting pitchers? Are they? I mean, why not try some of these guys in the bullpen first, right? I mean, we're gonna put the list back on
Yeah.
here. These are all the pitchers the Marlins have right now that could have the option to be in the 40-man roster. I mean, there are some. I mean, we have what 6, 7 good solid starters right now. I
Yeah, I think
mean,
so. I mean, and listen, the reality is that's where the strength of this team is, right? The starting rotation. Sandy, Pablo, Trevor, right up there, 1, 2, 3. You're not going to get very many teams that have a better 1, 2,
yeah,
3 at the front end of their rotation, right? I mean, Pablo's velocity was down the other day, which is a little concerning, so hopefully he gets that sorted out. But those 3 right there, I mean, that's a playoff rotation, like the
yeah,
front 3 of the playoff rotation. The back end of it, Luzardo's looked really good this spring. And he seems like he's sort of taken hold of either that 4th or 5th starter spot. And then, the other guy that we're assuming is getting that spot is Eliezer Hernandez, right? Because he has that experience and he's done it before.
yeah.
But earlier this week, Edward Cabrera had his first appearance, and he was awesome. He threw, 3 innings against the Nationals, and he, handled his business perfectly. I don't think he gave up. I don't think he gave up a hit.
No,
And
he threw 4 scoreless. Yeah, you're right.
yeah, so so then you start to think about, all right, so that's 6 guys, right? They're only going to run with 5. If Cabrera makes a case for the starting rotation, I would love for them to put Eliezer Hernandez as the long reliever in.
Yeah, and he's done it before.
Yeah, and he has done it before. And when you look at his numbers, he's been really, really good the first 2 times through an opposing lineup, right? The first
Yeah,
2 turns of the lineup, really, really good. But when he gets to that 3rd turn through the lineup, he hits a wall.
yeah,
He hits an absolute wall, and it's completely sort of inexplicable. Batting average against for Eliezer Hernandez, 3rd time through the order. The batting average against is 346 with a 1.18 OPS. Teams tee off on him in that 3rd time through the lineup, be it, the 5th inning, the end of the 5th inning, or the 6th or the 7th, whatever the case may be. He just seems to hit this wall. So there's almost like this natural progression. Like, it really sort of makes sense for him to be the long man in, coming out of the bullpen. He could throw 2 innings with no problem, right?
yeah.
Throw 3 innings if need be. And now with the universal DH, you don't have to worry about pinch hitting for him
Yeah,
or anything like that.
that was a
So
problem for the Marlins.
yeah. So I think, in terms of the starters, that really seems to make sense to me, especially since they sent Max Meyer down to AAA this week as well.
Yeah, that I mean, him and Brian De La Cruz were two guys that I thought maybe could have a chance to compete for a spot in the roster. So there you go. That's the situation right now with the bullpen. The Marlins don't have really big names, but hopefully they can compete, right? And because that is, I mean, our division is just it's hard. It's going to be hard for the Marlins to compete there, and we'll see what happens. Our friends from Fish Tribes are saying Eliezer simply hasn't developed a consistent changeup entering his fifth big league season. Not reasonable to expect him to master it now. Well, yeah, that's a valid point. I mean, you can still learn new pitches. The thing is are you gonna throw like your fourth or fifth best pitch in a strikeout situation? This is where the confidence on the new pitch learn gets a little bit of. It's hard. It's hard. I mean, we're seeing Walker Bueller working. I mean, I know the difference is Eliezer Hernandez is not Walker Bueller, but Walker Bueller is adding a changeup to his repertoire. So that's what I'm talking about. I mean, he can still do it. David, you were talking about pitchers from last year. Jimmy Garcia, we dealt him to Houston to bring Brian De La Cruz. He had a decent last month in the season, and I thought he was going to be the center fielder for this team, if not Jesus Sanchez. None of them are. I mean, I guess Jesus Sanchez is going to start there. Maybe we saw also Brian Anderson getting a start there in center field. Avisail Garcia was supposed to also get a shot there. I mean, we don't really have a natural center fielder. Maybe John Birdie plays some games over there. I don't know. What do you think about this situation?
Yeah, no, I mean center field looks like it's a little bit of a mess, right? And then when they started Brian Anderson there the other day, it was almost like you had a flashback of Jonathan VR getting starts in center field and what a disaster that was. I think listen, they said that Avisail Garcia could play center and he hadn't appeared, but he's in the lineup at center field like tonight, I think.
Okay.
So, we're going to get a look at him and see how he fares. He has a little bit of experience there. But you're right. They don't have a true center fielder on the 40-man roster, right? They have the non-roster invitees and Roman Quinn and Delano DeShields Jr., but those guys are a fourth or fifth outfielder at best, right? They're not going to be somebody who's going to be in the lineup regularly. There'll be defensive replacements, things like that. But then, so you wonder, how are they going to solve this problem, right? Because there's sort of this clear hole. And I mean, beyond trading for Brian Garcia, right? Because we heard today that, Pittsburgh is talking to San Diego all of a sudden.
Brian Reynolds. Yeah.
Yeah, Brian Reynolds. I'm sorry. But Pittsburgh's been engaged with, half a dozen teams or so. If that doesn't happen, if they don't make that move, they have to go with what they have, right? And Mattingly said this the other day. I want to read it so I don't get it wrong. When you build your club this way, you're going to have some deficiencies in certain areas. It's pretty clear center field defense or outfield defense sort of as a whole is going to be one of those deficiencies. And that's obviously not something that you want to hear your manager say in spring training. But that's the reality of the situation, right? They're going to have to patch this together. I mean, with the guys on the roster right now, Jesus Sanchez probably has the best upside as a center fielder, but he's dealing with, that rib injury, right? He's supposed to be in the lineup, I think maybe later this week. So we'll have to see how he does, right? But he probably makes the most sense, We'll see how Garcia does tonight. And Garcia's been okay during spring training, with the bat. And obviously he's going to be in the lineup, Soler's not an option in center field. And if Birdie is, your everyday starter at center field, or something has obviously gone wrong.
Now he's going to get a couple of stars here and there, spot stars.
Yeah. I mean, the big question is, what are they doing? Why are they putting Brian Anderson out there? I think they want to sort of maximize versatility, right? And Joey Wendell has been really, really good in spring. And he is a guy that can play, all over the infield for the most part, but he's primarily a third baseman. We've seen Brian Reynolds have success in the outfield before, in
Brian Anderson.
I'm sorry, Brian Anderson. I keep throwing names incorrectly. Sorry. In 2018 and 2019, Anderson had
Yeah,
144 starts in right field, and he played really, really well. I think it was,
he is a good outfielder. Yeah,
yeah, 17 assists, 17 outfield assists, 6 defensive run saves. I mean, he's a good corner outfielder. He's got a great arm. Does that translate to center field? Not as cleanly as maybe you would like.
yeah.
But obviously, if they want to work Wendell into the lineup consistently, and Wendell's played a little bit in the outfield too, but never in center field. You got to find places for these guys. And I think at this point, the Marlins are just going to go with let's try and outscore everybody. And defense and bullpen be damned at this, with they're going to go at it like the Phillies,
I
which
mean, I'd
could be
rather
really fun.
have I'd rather have a lineup that can produce at least to start the season. Maybe you change this if it's not working. But I mean, I guess we're tired of just losing games 2-1 or three
Yeah.
to two.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point you gotta say, you know what, we're going with what we have. Like tonight's lineup, you were talking about it. They're playing the Cardinals tonight in a little bit. It's Jorge Soler playing left field, Cooper in first, Wendell third base, Abisail Garcia center field, Aguilar is the DH, Brian Anderson is starting in right field, Jazz Chisholm in second, Jacob Stallings the catcher, and Miguel Rojas the shortstops. I mean, this looks like the starting the
Yeah.
opening day lineup right there.
I don't think that they can put together a stronger offensive lineup than
Yeah,
that one.
that's it. That's
That
what we have.
Yeah, that's the line. And then I mean, those guys have to score 5 or 6 runs, and the starters, which are the strength of the team, have to keep the opponents to like 2 or 3 runs, which isn't out of
Right.
the realm of possibility, right? But then they have to pitch to like the 6th or the 7th inning to kind of minimize the stress on the bullpen. So it's going to be interesting, that's for sure. I don't know what they're going to do in center field, and I'm not sure that they know what they're going to do in center field.
I think they're just gonna roll with Avisail Garcia there and see what happens. It's the feeling I get, and I mean, and that's what I would do more than playing Brian Anderson there, who's never played there before. I would put a guy that maybe is slower, but I mean, he's been there and has done it before, and maybe see what happens. I mean, it's hard, and center field in Marlins Park, it's rough.
Yeah.
It's not an easy path to go. And they started playing this season in San Francisco, which is another
Okay.
park, which is not very simple for a new outfielder out there.
No,
So
no. I mean, that's a nightmare. Your first major league start in center field is in San Francisco. Forget it.
yeah, no, that doesn't make any sense. I'd rather have Anderson there in right field because I mean that's the only option you have. The other option is like we said, playing some other guys like Birdie or I don't know Cooper in right field or something
No,
else.
listen. Cooper should never play defense in the outfield
Again,
ever again. Ever again. Like there's if he ends up in playing defense, if he ends up in right field, even for 1 inning this season, Mattingly is just trolling everybody. Like he's just messing with people at that point because there's no reason to put Cooper out there ever again.
yeah, I remember last year when Jorge Alfaro ended up playing some games in the outfield as well. It's been some
Yeah.
crazy years for the Marlins, and hopefully this roster can compete a little better than last year. So tonight, Trevor Rogers starting that game in Jupiter. They're playing their neighbors, the St. Louis Cardinals, with Albert. Let me see if Albert Pujols in the lineup. No, he's not
Well,
in the lineup.
hopefully the Cardinals don't put up another, 20
20
some odd runs.
28 runs. So no Albert Pujols tonight. Harrison Bader, Arenado, Paul DeYoung from the starters. That's about it. So
Yeah.
no Pujols tonight, but we do have the what seems to be the opening day lineup for the Marlins, and let's see how they do.
Yeah.
Thank you,
The
David.
pitchers, the pitchers they have tonight, they had Trevor Rogers starting, like you said,
Who's
but
in
then
relief?
there are also the available pitchers are Lewis Head, Richard Blyer, Anthony Bass, Will Stewart, and I hope I'm saying this right, Anuris Zabala.
There
So
you go.
those are the other pitchers that we're going to see tonight.
Quick question: Did I mean 4 or 5 games that I've watched this preseason, I've seen this guy Will Myers pitch. Do you think he has a chance? I mean, he played Double A last year. He's a
Yeah, I
lefty.
mean,
Mm,
he's a lefty, and he's obviously the since Sixto's hurt, he's the last hope for the JT Realmuto trade, right?
yeah,
I mean, he came up through the system as a starter, so maybe he's a long relief guy, but He's struggled at times in the minors, and I mean they might have him around just to eat up innings here in the spring or to give him a closer look. But I'd probably be surprised. I mean, unless he you know pitches out of his mind over the course of the next few days.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if he breaks camp with the club. I mean, maybe Jacksonville for him, right? But they've got a handful of other guys: Grant Dayton, Sean Guther. They claimed Tommy Nance off of waivers from the Cubs. Jimmy Jacobinis, Sean Armstrong is somebody that they supposedly really like. Huskar Brazoban. I know I slaughtered some of these names, and I apologize. But there's a bunch of guys that are kind of in the mix for that last spot or two in the bullpen, because they're probably going to carry, I would imagine, 14, because the expanded rosters in April. So there's a little bit of space. There's space for probably at least one, maybe two of those guys.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if they keep any of the starters, the young starters that we saw from last year, Campbell, Cody Poteet, Braxton Garrett, Castano. Maybe one of those guys becomes a long reliever. So they have some options. They're just, they're not great options.
Yeah. Quantity, a lot of names, a lot of options for the Marlins, and we'll see if that works this season. So, well, that's it. That's what we have for today. The two main concerns: the pitching in the bullpen, and also who's going to play in center field and what's the lineup going to look like on opening day against the San Francisco Giants, who are going to be a tough opponent to start the season for the Marlins. So we're going to be back sometime soon before the actual opening day here on our Marlins report to talk a little bit more about the whatever or whenever they announce the final roster. We'll probably discuss it and see how things can shape up for the Marlins this season. Again, thank you, David, and thank you guys for joining us. Share this content with your friends, your Marlins fans. I know they're out there. They're waiting for content to be produced, so we're doing some stuff here on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel to keep you guys informed. The guys from Men on Second are doing a great job. Frisaro and all the team there with their podcast and everything they're doing, covering the team daily. They're not only in Jupiter but around South Florida. So have a good night. Enjoy the game that is just starting right now. Trevor Rogers is facing Bader at this moment. So that's gonna be it for tonight. Enjoy it. Bye. Have a good night.